The new French president, Macron, was off on the same riff, and he was sounding wonderful. He was talking about liberty. He was talking about freedom. He was talking about democracy. And then he went off the rails toward the end of this thing and started talking about climate change. And there is no planet B. And the Democrats in the place just stood up and started laughing and applauding, and first standing O of the day from their side of the aisle. And then the guy starts, he says, I am sure that one day the United States will rejoin the Paris Accord. And once again, the Democrats stood up and went nuts. And I'm thinking the only way that's going to happen is if we ever elect a Democrat again, and global warming is still a big issue out there, which, I should say climate change. It will be, because it isn't going to go away. And then, while this guy is going on and on, he was really good, folks. He was really good talking about liberty, democracy, freedom, the relationship historically between the United States and France. I mean, he was really good. He's got this down pat. He could have been a Native American. He could have been a thoroughbred, if you didn't know any better, a thoroughbred conservative with a French accent. And then the guy goes off the rails talking about globalization, saying nationalization is bad. We can't do this nationalization stuff. We can't because the world is going to continue to evolve. We cannot get into isolation as though that's what the United States is involved in. It's not. We're not becoming isolationist, and we're not. This whole definition of nationalism and populism, nationalism by itself as though it's some evil word or bad thing. We're not getting out of the world. We're not forgetting the world. We're not stopping international trade. We are not giving up our role of leading the world and promoting freedom and democracy as long as the Democrats are not in office. When they're in office, all that goes out the window. And it really does, folks. The United States as a superpower goes out the window. The United States as a leading light goes out the window. United States beacon, freedom, hope, democracy goes out the window when the Democrats are in power, particularly in the White House. But this guy goes off the rails, insisting on globalization, the Paris Accords, and returning to them so that the world can save Planet A, because there is no Planet B, and then giving the Iranians nuclear weapons. I mean, it was a giant disconnect. I think the guy was trying to placate everybody in the audience, and certainly his audience back home, where he's in ratings trouble. He's in presidential approval number. Are you aware of that? The guy's approval numbers have sort of plummeted in France. But he also was great in detailing the genuine history between France and the United States. It was good. Sarkozy was better because Sarkozy was consistent throughout, but I'll never forget the Sarkozy speech. I was stunned by it. I mean, I literally thought I was listening to somebody born and raised in this country who got it, who understood. And it was a pleasure to hear, because even from the French president back then, and today too, Macron said things you just don't hear Democrats of today talk about unless they're ripping it or criticizing it. So we might have some sound bites. It's not a crucial thing. But I thought that I would, in response to this, we got a little story here. Climate change not as bad as we thought, say scientists. And this is in a London paper. It's a UK paper. It's the Express. Climate change likely to be markedly less severe than forecast, a study claimed yesterday. It predicted that the impact will be up to 45% less intense than is widely accepted. Still just another forecast. There still isn't any empirical data in any of this climate change stuff. Do you realize, seriously, folks, the only quote-unquote evidence for climate change is computer models? I'm not making this up. There isn't any empirical evidence that there is abnormal warming taking place. All there are is a bunch of computer models that predict it, Of course, computer models are only as good as the data that's input. And the data that's input is biased, of course, by people who are politicians, not scientists. They're disguised as scientists, but they're actually politicians. And aside from the computer models predicting things 30 years from now, 50 years from now, there isn't any evidence of climate change. The sea levels are not receding. New islands are being created, by the way. That wouldn't happen if the sea level were receding. There's all kinds of evidence to refute the allegations, but there isn't a shred of evidence. All there is a bunch of fear by millennials who've bought into all of this that the planet's not going to be habitable by the time they are 60 or 65. And so their fear of that sort of governs their belief in the plus fear and fright are two of the key techniques used to persuade people, particularly young people today. They work, but there isn't any evidence. It's just like this climate change not as bad as we thought, say scientists. There isn't even any science in climate change when you get right down to it. No settled science is ever declared settled because of computer models. Anyway, it predicted the impact will be up to 45% less intense than widely accepted, but the study emerged as other scientists said winter waves pounding the Scottish and Irish coasts have grown by up to 5 feet 6 inches over the past 70 years. That is impossible to measure. The height of waves? I can take you out here in March, and I can show you the height of waves out here on the Atlantic Ocean that we don't usually see in March. It had nothing to do with climate change. It had everything to do with high and low pressure areas. That every time a cold front goes through here, the height of waves, cold front, not warm front, a cold front goes through here, is when the surfers go nuts. Take up all of our parking spaces, block up all of our roads. You can't get home because of the surfers. And they're never surfing in the summer. There aren't any waves in the summer unless there are hurricanes out there. They're always surfing in the winter. Anyway, I just wanted to share this because something is making this group dial this back. Who is this group anyway? Study in the Journal of Climate predicts rises in the typical bogus, nothing to see here. It's just a political movement that is disguised as science. Now, if you'll permit me a brief departure into inside baseball. Over the years, and even now, I'll be honest, even now, I am under, I wouldn't call it pressure, although, depending, it could be if you looked at it that way, but I'm under a lot. There are beaucoup requests for me to go on TV, to go back to TV. And I'm flattered by it, and I'm always receptive. I would listen to what people say. But I have no burning desire to go back to TV. And there are many reasons for it, but the primary reason, well, it's hard to pick a primary reason. I mean, the primary reason I don't want to do it, but then after that is the why, which would be just as equal. And I was thinking about it the other day. I had to do a speech. I had to do a last minute, I had a replacement speech. General Defense Secretary Mattis was going to speak to the Marine Corps Law Enforcement Foundation. And he ended up having to cancel because of the action that was being contemplated at the time and that eventually happened in Syria. So they asked if I would stand in. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to. I said, how long do you want? I said, 15 minutes max. I said, 15 minutes. I don't even get started in 15 minutes. And immediately I started feeling a little bit of pressure. The reason I feel pressure is because I cannot prepare a speech. I cannot sit down and write one. My brain doesn't work. I have to ad-lib them. I have to, just like this radio show. Everything I've said today, I didn't know when I was going to say it. I didn't know what I was going to start with. And I didn't even know exactly what I was going to say. It's just happening. It is the essence of improv. You can't do this on TV. You simply cannot do what I'm doing right now on TV. It's not too many people have to know what you're going to do, and they have to know when you're going to do it. And whatever you want to do, they have to have some accompanying video. And I can't, I'm not A, not a collaborator, and B, I can't. I've never worked this way, to sit down and actually plan something out. And I don't do speeches that way. So every speech is a nail biter for me. What if my brain's not working in these 15 minutes? What if something doesn't occur to me to talk about? What if my memory is failing? Those are the things that equal the pressure for me before I do any, because none of it's planned and none of it's scripted, none of it's written. And TV, you can't do TV that way. I mean, you can't. I suppose you could, but it wouldn't be TV. You just bring a camera in here and put this on TV, but nobody wants to watch that. I mean, radio is to be heard, not seen, is a long-held belief of mine. But this is leading somewhere. Nielsen came out the other day with some shocking news. One of the reasons that I also say I don't want to go do a television show is the audience here is much larger than on cable. And when I tell people that, well, yeah, but it's a different audience on TV, and with Pictures Rush, it's going to have much more impact. I understand people thinking that. But if you have a good host that's able to paint pictures, create theater of the mind, just as impactful, just as influential, and maybe even more so, because television is spent doing other things too. You're watching, there's other things going on in the room. A lot of TV viewing is what I call passive. And a lot of radio listening is passive. You're listening to music, driving around, you're talking to people while the music's on. But a good radio program with a compelling host will be active. You will not want to not pay attention. But then there's this in addition to that. Nielsen has come out with some numbers, and this is about the relative audience size. Old school AM, FM radio is the most popular media of all. Still today in the United States of America, according to Nielsen, and these are the people that rate television programs. The way they do this, AM, FM radio has 243 million listeners. Radio reaches 93% of the U.S. population. Washington Times did a story on this back on April the 18th. And there's one picture accompanying this story, and it's half of the front page. And that picture is me. Now, they're all nodding on the other side of the glass. Even in the age of sophisticated cable TV and video on demand, it's old school AM/FM radio which rules the nation's media world, according to Nielsen, which has revealed the audience numbers. With 243 million monthly listeners, radio bests the competition across the board. Each week, more Americans tune to AM/FM radio than any other platform. What's more, according to Nielsen, 93% of U.S. adults 18 and older listen to radio every week. That's more than those watching TV or using a smartphone or a TV-connected device, an iPad, a tablet, or a PC. Television reaches 88% of Americans and 229 million people. Brad Kelly, the managing director for Nielsen Audio, says technology trends are a bit like fashion trends. They come and go, oftentimes long forgotten after the craze ends. But there's one notable exception to the technology fashion trend rule in the media world, and that is broadcast radio. AM/FM radio is the blue blazer of the media universe. Who would have believed 100 years after its debut, AM/FM radio would continue to top the charts as the medium that reaches more consumers each week than any other? The analysis cited, quote, compelling audio content and expanding delivery options as a strong factor in the consistent appeal of radio. And by expanding delivery options, he's talking about things like our app and podcasts and ways that augment the content. But compelling audio content, if it's done right, It's just as influential and can be much bigger than television. I'm not trying to put TV down. Do not misunderstand. It's not. This is not a versus, an either or, but it is to suggest that, you know, a lot of people think radio, that's old fashioned. Gee, that's nothing but old people. You'd be amazed at the numbers. Millennials. Nearly 80 million millennials, 18 to 34, tune in to radio. That's 95% of the millennial population. 95% of the millennial population listens to radio every week. Largest audience, of course, is boomers and then Generation X. But we hit everybody. That's my point. There's no boundaries. There's no religions. But with all three sexes, we have all the religions. All the different genders, everybody is out there. And it's, you know, good radio is much more personal, much more intimate than television. I'm not putting TV down. Please do not misunderstand. I'm just reminding everybody of the true impact and power of radio. And to illustrate it further, the first two audio sound bites today, NPR, in a continuing quest to help their audience understand America, and particularly Texas, decides to divide Texas into people who listen to AM radio and people who listen to FM radio. That's coming up. Don't go away. Discussing his new book, God Save Texas, A Journey into the Soul of the Lone Star State. And the host says, you describe a key divide in the culture of people in Texas as to who listens to AM and who listens to FM, right?
You can drive all across Texas and be in two different states. If you're listening to AM, you're hearing Rush Limbaugh. Then you hear the evangelical preachers and a lot of Spanish radio. That's the AM band. And the best, most full expression of that is our Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, probably the most conservative politician we've ever elected in Texas, who is really driving the train of social conservative activism right now in Texas. And he is a shock jock from Houston who has his own radio stations. And he comes from that AM culture.
All right. So this is NPR trying to help their audience understand Texas. And so he's got to get into this is how the leftists do it. This is disguised bigotry. But I have to say something with Dan Patrick. Dan Patrick, one of his first stations was in Tomball, Texas, outside Houston, and that was our first station in the Houston market. Dan Patrick is not a shock jock. Dan Patrick has never been a shock jock. This whole term shock jock, I mean, they used to call me that until they realized that I mean, not even close. Shock jock, what do you think of a shock jock? You think somebody that's rude and off color. Dan Patrick, nowhere near shock jock, but that's how this stuff gets categorized. Anyway, brief timeout. We'll come back and continue after this. Now, here is the second soundbite from public radio in New York yesterday. This is a writer named Lawrence Wright with his new book, God Save Texas, A Journey into the Soul of Lone Star State. So he's just described in Texas who listens to AM, and that means what they are and who they are politically. And he points out that the AM band in Texas is ascendant right now. Now, for those of you in Rio Linda, that means it's climbing. That means it's growing. It means it's getting higher. As in when you descend something, you're going down. When you ascend, you're going up. And he makes that point, then shifting to FM.
The AM band is in ascendant in politics right now, but the FM is just as much a part of Texas as the AM. It's urbane, it's metropolitan, it's, you know, sophisticated, and it sounds just like radio anywhere you would go, any FM station. And that it expresses the soul of the cities, which are blue, and which are sophisticated and very much a part of the rest of America. The cities are blue. Period. The rural culture has been red for a considerable amount of time, but that's not where the growth is.
Right, you see the way this is going here, folks.
And the suburbs. And, you know, the political demography of the suburbs is beginning to drift away from that solid red core.
AM radio, people in the sticks, hayseed hicks, unsophisticated. FM radio, cities, blue, sophisticated. He said that 2 different times in this bite. The cities are blue, sophisticated, very much part of the rest of America. The red parts, the hayseed, the hicks out there, and this is the way the left looks at this country. And that's what this guy is doing here. But he says the AM band is ascending right now in politics, which upsets them. That takes us to Arizona. There was a special election in Arizona yesterday, and the Democrats, they had already put it in the hopper as a win. And they were going to win, and it was just the beginning, the next phase of this gigantic blue wave that's going to happen in November. Except it didn't happen. The vote count as of this morning wasn't final, but Republican Debbie Lesko is ahead of the Democrat Hiro Tipernini by a 5-point margin. Wasn't supposed to happen. So here we have a CNN story, and here's the headline. Why the win for Republicans in Arizona 8 is still good for Democrats. You see how this works? Even when the Democrats lose, they win. And it's been this way with every special election they have won this year and last. Oh, yeah, this is big for the Democrats. This ought to have the Republicans very, very nervous. What do you mean? You guys said the Democrats were going to win this. We have been told, we have been taunted. They have told us gleefully for 12 months that no Republican will ever win another election because of Trump. The entire country was going blue. The country's fed up with Trump. The country hates Trump. Even Trump voters are embarrassed and wish they could take their vote back, and they will, first chance they get. But somehow, a Republican woman won yesterday in a special election in Arizona, which means the Republicans hold on to the seat. Arizona 8. Debbie Lesko has now defeated this guy. I think the final margin was 6 points. That is wider than the polling has been in this race. Once again, polling got it wrong. But here's how they do this. They said, well, it was much tighter than the over 20 points by which Trump won in 2016. So they're doing here what they tell us we can't do. Let me give you a comparison or an analogy. The way they're doing this is comparing a presidential turnout to a single race or very few races on the ballot, practically an entirely local election, to completely different turnouts. And yet the drive-bys here are treating them as the same. So what they want their readers to believe is that in a district that Trump won by 20 points, the Republican held on to it, but only by 6, which means Trump is really losing popularity. Republicans are really losing popularity. And this means even with this win, the Republicans know they're in deep trouble. The Democrats lost the seat. They thought they had it in their back pocket. This is like trying to compare a midterm election turnout with a presidential year turnout. They're different. Different energy, different issues, different types of demographics represented. Overall turnout is much different in an off-year election than a presidential election. Same thing here. But the media is trying to conflate the two and have them mean the same thing. And every media story about this covers it the same way. Why the win for Republicans in Arizona 8 is still good for Democrats. AP, GOP unsettled by narrow win in House race in Arizona. Yeah, it took a big money push from the GOP, tweets by Trump, and the support of the state's current and former governors, but the GOP held on to Arizona 8. See, they would have never considered endangered in another year. So it's weird. We're supposed to sit here and say it's weird that the president would support the candidate. It's weird the party would support the candidate. It's weird that the state's current and former governors would support the candidate. That's weird. It took big money push from the GOP. It took tweets by Trump, and it took the support of the state's current and former governors, but the GOP held. Isn't that what happens in every election? For the most part, Republicans came out and supported their candidate. The candidate won. Somehow this is a problem for the Republicans. They had to do this. Isn't this the way Democrats did? Didn't they think Hillary was going to win simply by doing nothing? They thought Hillary was going to win without Hillary campaigning. She didn't have to go to these blue states because it was in the bag. Meanwhile, Trump's out there working it and working it. He ends up winning the presidency. The Democrats are discombobulated and bamboozled. It's odd that the Republicans actually campaigned. It's odd the Republicans actually spent money on the seat. So the Republicans did. And by the way, I thought Trump was an albatross. I thought Trump was a drag on the ticket. Why did Trump's tweets help? If everybody hates Trump, so goes the thinking. And if so many people want Trump gone, if so many people regret their vote for Trump, how come Trump was able to help Ms. Lesko win? Now, this points to something that needs further discussion, unpacking, and analysis. Because it's not news the Democrats do this. It's not news the media is unfair and biased like this. We point out the ongoing examples. But there's a larger, what does it all mean? And not just this, but this entire resistance movement. What does it all mean? What does it really mean in terms of our country's future? What does it mean that the Democrat Party you and I grew up with doesn't exist anymore? What does it mean that the Democrat Party has been taken over by the radical left, which is literally resisting everything, and they are refusing to acknowledge and tolerate and deal with the fact that they lose elections now and then? We're getting to the point where they will not accept losing. They will not tolerate others winning and are not going to go away until they can tear all that down. This is really serious stuff, if you ask me. It's more than just chronicling what they're doing and how they're doing it. Is where is all this taking us? I had a charity golf tournament yesterday, and I had a chance to speak with Gary Player for an extended period of time. He's a great South African, one of the greatest professional golfers ever. And he and Jack Nicklaus did a clinic for the participants at the tournament, which was at Nicklaus's club, the Bears Club up in Jupiter. Boy, is it nice. Gary Nicklaus, Jack's son, was part of the festivities. He's a great guy too. It was really a great day. And I had a lot of people that came up and wanted to chat. And one of the things I'm continually asked now is not if I am aware of some recent example of outrageous behavior by the left, but people are becoming increasingly concerned about what does it mean? It's not, this is not the usual Democrat opposition. This is when the left can get away with, like this professor at Fresno State, can get away with wishing more Bushes would die, and she's going to end up not being punished by Fresno State now. She's going to totally get away with it. People have an awareness, a sensitivity that something's amiss here, something's awry, and it isn't good. And I was talking to people about the way I explain this to people is the analogy that I've used about America during the World War II, and America today. We had divisions in World War II. We had disagreements. We had competing ideologies. We had competing political parties. But back then, losers lost, accommodated. The winners tried to figure out what they did that went wrong with the voters and tried to correct and become winners the next time around. There was an implicit, applied agreement that we were all in this together, and that regardless differences, there was a singular thing that bound us together, and that is we're all Americans. And that counted for something. That meant a lot. America was the greatest place on earth. America's where everybody wanted to come to be the best they could be, to make the most of their lives. It still is. But it's changing. If something happened today akin to World War II, I don't know that we have anything that binds us together as a country anymore. And this is more than just my saying that we don't have any common ground to reach across the aisle and come to agreements with people. I don't really know what binds us together with the radical left, which is taking over the Democrat Party. They're not a fringe. They've been fringe for most of the last 50 years, but they are now the mainstream of the Democrat Party. And I don't know what binds us together as Americans, because the group of people I'm talking about is not proud of being an American. They're not proud of America. They think America is the problem in the world. They don't think of America as the solution. They don't think of America as having any kind of moral authority. We're not the good guys. And it's worse than that. We are, in many of their eyes, the bad guys. And this country must be drastically cut down, drastically remade, transformed, or what have you. And it is, so you have this little story here about how the Republicans now are nervous. The Republicans are very worried, even after they won. It's why this matters, instead of the fact that it's happening, is where we next need to take this. Because we can sit here and document all day the examples of unfairness, of bias, of insanity, of lunacy on the left. But what does it actually mean? Get another analogy. 30 years ago, this program started, and they start calling us Nazis, and they start calling us racists and sexists, and they do this crazy stuff like Global Peace March. We laughed at them. We laughed at everything they were talking about, because we said to ourselves, there's no way anybody's going to believe this. 30 years later, a lot of people have ended up believing what is genuine to us insanity. What we used to laugh at and think that nobody could ever really believe, that they do. They do. And now, when they start labeling people as Nazis, they are dead serious, and you'll note that it is not categorically rejected. It is considered. People think about it. People begin to intellectually analyze the comparison. Is there a grain of truth to it, some people say? It's a slowly creeping, insidious sickness. I have to take a break here. I'm going to continue this. Mix your phone calls in the whole presentation as well. All that continuing after this. But first, in Arizona, let me tell you why the Democrat lost. And the margin of defeat for 6 points, he lost. The Democrat's name is Hiral Tiperneni, down by 6. Person ran. She ran as a full-fledged liberal Democrat. The Democrats are feeling it. I've told you, they're taking the mask off. They're overly confident. They become arrogant, and they think, because of the lies they tell themselves and the disservice their lying media does, reinforcing lies that they end up believing. She ran as an open liberal and got trounced. The Democrats that have won special elections have hidden it. In many cases, they sounded more conservative than their Republican opponents. But what I mean by this resistance business, I've sharing with you the fact that what I believe the Russia-Trump collusion movement has really been about. I mean, the big overall thing it's been about is getting rid of Trump, but how? I really believe that the effort of all of these different elements of the pursuit of Trump has been designed to drive Trump's approval numbers down to the 30s and hopefully the 20s. I think they have also wanted to drive Donald Trump insane. I think they want to make him sick. I'm talking physically, mentally ill. I think they want to do it. They don't have any evidence whatsoever to get rid of him. But note how that's not stopping them. They've got no evidence that Trump has broken any law. There is no evidence Trump colluded. That hasn't stopped them, has it? They just keep making it up. They keep applying the pressure. And when one vein bottoms out and fails, they open a new one. They do not accept being rejected. They do not accept that they are failing. They keep going on their objective of destroying Donald Trump. Now, what is this doing to the country as they do this? And that's what we need to be discussing. Because the fact that they're doing it is obvious now. And noting how they're doing it and what they're doing each day, there's no news in that anymore. What is this causing is the focal point. And he's the guy that gave Donald Trump his last physical and raved and raved and raved about Donald Trump's health. And the drive-bys and the Democrats immediately began to attack his fairness and impunity, veritably accusing him of lying about Trump's health, accusing him of making it up, accusing him of being partisan. Now his nomination for the to be head of the VA has become mired in controversy. You know why? Because this guy, Ronnie Jackson, who they continually refer to as Trump's doctor, apparently went on drunken rampages and apparently was passing out prescriptions for pain medication, anybody who wanted them. And apparently, during his drunken rampages, he'd be knocking on doors all over the White House. Except none of this happened in the last 2 years. All of this happened when Ronnie Jackson was White House physician while Obama was president and while this guy was Obama's doctor. And so the question is, and John Tester, by the way, senator from, where's Tester from? Montana, Idaho, somewhere up there with the bison. John Tester is among many asking, wait a minute now, wait a minute, if we knew this about this guy back during the Obama administration, why was he not fired back? If this guy's getting drunk, he's the White House doctor. I knew it was Montana, the bison place. I knew it was that. That's what I said, Montana, Idaho. I knew it was Montana. The point is, why isn't anybody asking, why did this guy continue to be used by Obama? Why did Obama continue to use the guy as his doctor if he was getting involved in these drunken rampages and knocking on doors and passing out pain med prescriptions left and right? This stuff is surfacing now only after he's been nominated to the VA. Look, I don't know what's true, what isn't true. That's not the point here. But there sure as hell is a pattern. And it dovetails with the point that I'm making here today. This stuff was widely known back when Obama was in the White House, and nobody thought to report the guy. Did Obama know that this guy's on drunken rampages and passing out pain meds left and right when the guy is acting as Obama's White House doctor? Did Obama not know and nobody told him? Don't give me a break. Of course Obama knew. It's like Joy Ann Reid. This, you know something? Homosexuality and liberalism is one of the biggest myths. The fact of the matter is that liberals, when you get right down to it, they're not that big on homosexuality. Jimmy Kimmel makes gay jokes. Colbert making gay jokes. Getting called on the carpet for it, but they get away with it. Why? Because they're in the family. Because they're liberals, and so everybody looks the other way. Until they get called out on it, and then they have to do something about it. But it's never a full-fledged or permanent banishment or punishment. But Jimmy Kimmel can start telling gay jokes all night long and talking about conservatives, and Colbert can get crude with it by basically implying that Putin and Trump engage in oral sex. But what are they making fun of? They're making fun of homosexuality. They're making fun of gayness. It's disguised as making fun of Trump or making fun of conservatives. What it is homophobia. But they get away with it because, quote unquote, they're in the family. Now the latest is Joy Reid, who is this lunatic wacko host on MSNBC. And she has had post after post after post on Twitter and her Facebook page, a lot of anti-gay venom, a lot of anti-gay so-called humor. And she's claiming that she was hacked, that she didn't say these things. And so now an investigation is underway to find out if indeed she was hacked or if what she posted was really her. And it was, and it's going to be found. MSNBC is waiting to decide what to do with her until the results of the investigation. But I'm here to tell you, she wasn't hacked. The Russians did not hack Joy Reid's Facebook account or her Twitter account. And the anti-homosexual rants that she's gotten into are really vile and ugly. But the dirty little secret is, look at all of the homophobia that you will find on the left, and sometimes they slip up and they start telling gay jokes. And it ought to awaken the homosexual left, the political homosexual community, as to what's really the case on their side of the aisle and so-called in their family. Because it's all for show. None of it is legit. And this provides a dovetail, if you will, into... It's not a point that I'm trying to make. It's a new direction here. It's not even that. It's just a new way of thinking about things. And let me go back to how the left is dealing with Trump. What really happened? Let's get really down to the basics. We had a presidential election that Trump won. It was a duly constituted and fair election. There has been no evidence. There's not a shred of evidence anywhere that there was any kind of fraud or chicanery resulting in Trump's win or that explains Trump's win. Now, in the old days, when a party won the presidency, the out-of-party accepted it. Out-of-power party accepted it, went along with it, and tried to make adjustments to win the next time. And they did their best to politically obstruct the winner and his party from advancing an agenda, but despite that, there was a comity or there was a unity about us all being Americans. There was an acknowledgement that there are winners and losers and that it can change with every election. And trying to win every election became the objective. Of course, you can't win them all. But some years ago, when the left began losing elections, they refused to accept it. Now, this is not a minor point. The most recent example is Florida 2000, the presidential election in 2000 and the Florida recount, where George Bush was named president after having duly won the election. All the Supreme Court did was shut down an ongoing irrelevant count. The election had been certified. Everything in the Florida recount was an attempt to overthrow and reverse a duly constituted election. And then what happened after that? For the next 8 years, the Democrat Party spent every waking hour trying to ruin George W. Bush, trying to paralyze his presidency, trying to drive his polling numbers down to the 30s. They knew they would never be able to impeach Bush, but they wanted to render his presidency absolutely paralyzed. They made no bones about who they were going to destroy or try to destroy when they were doing it. All this time, there's not a single defense of Bush from his own team, from his own administration. The left got away with every lie, every stinking mischaracterization and lie about Bush, to the point that by the end of Bush's term, the U.S. military was nothing more than a bunch of terrorists who were terrorizing Iraqi women and children at night in their homes. There were elected Democrats who were postulating this from the floor of the House and the floor of the Senate. We had Dick Durbin comparing uniformed military personnel to Pol Pot, a mass murderer in Cambodia. And it stuck. He was ridiculed for it here, but not by anybody on the left and not by anybody in the media. This refusal, and when I say refusal to accept defeat, we have in this country an honor system. Take it to the world of sports. Football game, baseball game, take your pick. Let's take everything happening in politics and move it to, say, it's baseball season, now let's do baseball. So see, after a 9-inning game, the team that lost, refuses to accept that the game is over, refuses to accept that the other team won, and embarks on a mission to destroy the entire game of baseball. Not just the game that they lost, but the entire institution of the game, by calling into question everybody's integrity on the winning side, and by doing everything they can to erase the victors and to drum up public support for the idea that the game of baseball is dishonest, it's unfair, because the wrong team lost. How long would it be put up with? How long? It wouldn't even get off the ground. Something like that would not even get off the ground. Yet in American politics, it's not only off the ground, it is gaining ground left and right. Donald Trump wins an election. From the very night of his election victory, the people who lost this election have refused to obey common decency. They have refused to obey the law. The law itself is now unequal. On the Trump side, people are being accused of doing things they didn't do and are being rendered broke, penniless, defending themselves, while people on the Hillary side actually did break the law, actually did collude, actually did all of these things which are illegal, and they're not being held accountable for a single bit of it. Sorry, folks, we cannot have a country where some people are held accountable and other people aren't. And particularly when people who are thought in their own minds to be at the pinnacle of power, when they're above the law, when they're unaccountable, and the drive-by media fully supports that premise. Sorry, folks, where are we headed? It's not enough to note that it is happening. It is happening. What does it all mean? They thought they would get rid of Trump in 6 months. They haven't. They wanted to drive Trump's approval number down to 20. That would be the best way to get rid of him. There isn't any evidence that there was election fraud. There isn't any evidence that Trump cheated. All there is Trump and the fact that they hate him and they're angry that they lost. And now these baseless allegations that he's unsophisticated, unfit, and by virtue, so are all of you who voted for him. It has been a ceaseless, a never-ending personal, political assassination that is underway to this very day. And when one element of it fails, I think we have to assume now that the Mueller element has failed. After a year and a half, there is no evidence of Russian collusion. There is no evidence that Trump did anything illegal or cheated in any way to win the election. Despite there being no evidence, what's the left doing? Mounting new charges out of thin air, indicting new people, bringing new people had nothing to do with anything in, and putting them in the microscope to destroy them. This is becoming, they call this the resistance, but this isn't resistance. We're so far beyond resistance now. These people are doing much more than resisting. They are literally turning the law upside down. They are ignoring the law when it applies to them. They are accusing people who have not broken the law of having broken the law and forcing those people to either cop pleas or defend themselves, and in the process go broke and lose their homes, destroy their families. All of this on no evidence that anything of the original charge, that the election was tampered with and is therefore illegitimate. There's no evidence for it. It continues unabated. And as these people fail in every element that they try to get rid of Trump, what then happens? Trump becomes even worse. Trump is Hitler. Trump is no different than Mao Zedong. Trump is hideous. Trump, they keep throwing out these inane, insane, crazy allegations in their unstopping attempt, their never-ending attempt to create anti-Trump public opinion, which will then facilitate them getting what they want, and that is him thrown out of office. Part of it, it's personal with Trump, but another element of it has nothing to do with Trump. It's just the fact that they lost. And that's totally unacceptable. And what does that mean? Where does that take us? When the losers in a constitutional republic and in a quote-unquote democracy, when the losers refuse to acknowledge it and then start tearing down as much of the system as they can in anger and frustration for the express purpose of reinstalling themselves in power, what is this doing to the country? No good is what it's doing. It becomes crazier. It gets more insane each and every day. Where this is headed, folks, resistance isn't going to be enough, because resistance is not going to get them what they want. And they're not going to stop. They don't accept defeat. And when I say don't accept defeat, I don't mean in an intellectual sense refusing to say to them, oops, we lost. It's worse than that. It is that defeat is not possible. Defeat is intolerable. And not from a Winston Churchill, never give up, keep trying harder kind of thing. It's from an entitlement standpoint, from an angry entitlement standpoint. None of this is any good. It's going to lead to more unrest. It's going to lead to more anger. And in the process, people are tearing the country apart, which, by the way, is also an objective. I got to take a break. We'll be back and continue after this. With just a few occasional doubts, have been weaponized. They've been weaponized in the effort to destroy Donald Trump. At the root of all of this, at the root of every effort to get rid of Donald Trump is something called hate. Hatred. Now, we can get into the reasons why if you want. Why are they so mad that Trump won? Well, Trump wasn't supposed to win. It wasn't possible for Trump to win. In these people's world, he's just a total full-fledged reprobate. But he did win. And every hardcore belief that they trusted was thrown upside down. If somebody like Trump can't win, they look at themselves as having really screwed up, messed up. This has to be fixed in their minds. But what is propelling them? Their propulsion is pure, raw, undiluted hate. And it's infecting as much of America they can infect. We talk about it, late night comedy. There is no late night comedy anymore. It's late night hate. And it is late night hate all aimed at Donald Trump. The NFL, the National Football League, used to exist as an apolitical oasis. Whatever politics there was with the NFL was assumed, but it was never in our faces. Individual players might endorse a candidate here or there, but the league at large, just the NFL, it was football. It was, as much of sports is, an escape. The NFL has now become one of many outposts in America where Trump hate is the order of the day. And there's no end to it. And every one of these corruptions, late night comedy has been corrupted. And Robert De Niro is going insane. Robert De Niro is losing his mind over Donald Trump. Literally losing his mind right in front of us, as are so many famous big names on the left. They are publicly going insane over Donald Trump. There's nothing rational about it. But there's a problem with it. They're not succeeding. As they fail, as every effort that they have mounted to get rid of Trump fails. Now, I'm not saying it's not doing any damage. It's quite the opposite of that. But in their minds, nothing so far has worked to get rid of Donald Trump. Look at what they're corrupting in the process. How did these things become uncorrupted, folks? How does late night comedy go back to what it once was? How does it once again become late night comedy? How does the NFL shed what it has become? The drive-by media wants you to think the NFL and Colin Kaepernick in the same mental picture. And when you see that picture, you're supposed to side with Kaepernick and hate the NFL. The NFL, to avoid this, is doing everything they can to agree with Kaepernick except hire him and bring him back, which further angers the left. Where does this stuff get fixed? Where does it reverse itself? Where do we go back to quote-unquote normal from all this? Because as the left mounts all of this intense, focused hatred, the objective of which is to either make Donald Trump physically or mentally ill, or to force him to resign, or to drive every supporter away from him, drive public opinion down to 20%. They got a long way to go. Trump's approval numbers are steady and climbing, which means they're only going to intensify this. And as each stage or each effort that they engage in, each corruption that is designed to get rid of Trump fails, they move on and corrupt something else. They move on and hate on something else or somebody else. And they then start focusing people close to or nearby Trump in his orbit and try to destroy and corrupt and take them down. Now, again, it isn't new. It's just been part of a trend. I've noticed it for 30 years. It's been a very slowly evolving trend. You know, I've come under my share of attacks from these people, too, as they have sought similar, well, they've sought the same objective of me as they now seeking with Trump. They failed. They move on to others. They'll come back to me at some point. It never stops. But point is that with each failed effort, like the Mueller special counsel effort has failed, they had thrown all their eggs in that basket. But we know it's failed. Democrats are starting to tell us this by suggesting that when they begin to campaign in earnest for the midterm elections in 2018, don't talk about the investigation. Don't mention impeachment, because it didn't work. But the fact that it didn't work does not inform them. It doesn't educate them. It doesn't advise them. The fact that it didn't work only angers them more. It only makes them hate more. So they move on to the next effort, which was Manafort and Rick Gates. It was Flynn. Now they've moved on to Michael Cohen and anybody in his orb. And all of it means they've got nothing. On the terms of their original allegations that there is a lot of corruption and a lot of cheating and a lot of collusion, Trump, Russia, the election, there isn't a shred of evidence after nearly a year and a half. That does not stop them. This is a crucial point, folks, in understanding who they are. They are not pursuing truth at each of these intervals or with each of these stratagems to get rid of Trump. In other words, the Trump-Russia collusion that was never about Trump colluding with Russia. It was about getting rid of Donald Trump. It was about the combination of all efforts, the corruption of the FBI, the corruption of the DOJ, the corruption of the intelligence agencies, the corruption of John Brennan and CIA. All of this was designed to force Trump out of office, not because he colluded, but for all the other reasons. The mounting pressure, the fact that nobody likes him, the fact that the media joins in and makes look the whole country hate. All of this was supposed to be a mind trip on Trump, and he was supposed to cave inside of 6 months. But at no juncture are they pursuing actual truth. There is no collusion. There is no P-tape. But you know what is next on that regard? I'll tell you what I think's coming. I think they're going to find one. I think they're going to find a P-tape. Somebody's going to come forward and say they got one. They're going to manufacture one. They're going to go into a studio and they're going to manufacture something that looks like it's a secret video taken from a hotel room camera. And it's going to show some women urinating on a bed. This is my point. When each of these elements fail, they continue to ratchet it up. And failure is met with more failure. And at every stage of this, something is being ruined and destroyed. Something in our culture, something in our politics, something traceable to our founding. How does all of this get fixed? Or does it? Do these people keep on and keep on and keep on and eventually win? Or do they continue to be thwarted in their objective here of getting rid of Trump? Do they continue to be thwarted and lose and resort to more extreme measures? Such as, when does the resistance actually become violent? When does the resistance actually begin to look like Ferguson or Baltimore? Some of you are saying, Rush, they've already done that. Remember the women's march with the vagina hats after the election? Yeah, that was a precursor. But that was born of the same hatred, the same disbelief, the same shock that Trump won. Could not be. They didn't get their way. People call it a childlike tantrum. It might have been childlike in terms of maturity, but it was by design. And it happened exactly as the planners and the participants wanted it to happen. They don't think they're making fools of themselves. They don't think they are ineffective. They just haven't found the silver bullet yet. It's like believers in communism. Despite the fact it's never worked, believers in socialism, despite the fact there's no evidence that it ever creates anything like a utopia, they're still searching for it. They're still demanding it. They still believe it's out there if only the right people and the right amount of money are combined at the same time. So where does all this lead? And how do all of these things that they are destroying, how do they get fixed? And if this resistance actually becomes violent, what form does that take? Will these people mount an actual revolution that takes place other than on the airwaves via panel discussion on cable TV and the occasional out-of-control protest? No, I'll tell you why I think they're going to find a P-tape, because I think this is where this kind of stuff heads. They're desperate. Nothing. They've got no evidence for anything. And now they've got a guy who worked at the USA pageant who's, you know what? Wait a minute. I do remember Trump spent the night in Moscow. Trump has previously said he didn't have enough time in Moscow to spend an overnight. Some guy from a pageant says, wait a minute, out of the blue, first time we've heard, I think, yeah, Trump did spend the night. That opens the door. If he spent the night, he had to be where? A hotel room. What's the allegation? That he hired some prostitutes to come in and pee on the bed that Obama and Michelle had slept in. Don't be surprised if they come up with what they claim is a tape of it. How easy would it be to say that somebody in the GRU, the modern incarnation of the KGB, leaked it. None of the rest of this is true. None of the rest of this is legitimate. On a TV show coming up on Sunday night on CBS, only on their streaming network, CBS All Access, they're actually going to have a couple of prostitutes who peed on the bed show up at this fictitious law firm and hire these lawyers to represent them. They're going to present on a TV show that it happened and that Trump is out trying to silence these women and they need lawyers to help them out. Hollywood, movies, books, TV, they're all in on this hatred. They're all part of the group that cannot deal with this. Look at what they're destroying. Look at what they are corrupting. The law. The law now applies to some, but not others. James Comey should have already been indicted for crying out loud. James Comey broke the law in his July 5th press conference. He assumed the role of Attorney General. As the FBI director, it's not his call who gets prosecuted and who doesn't, yet he made it his call. That's not legal, not to mention proper, nor is this book in the midst of a so-called investigation. And now even drive-by lawyers are saying, man, this is not looking, Comey could well be indicted. No, that's the point. Comey isn't going to be indicted. Neither is Hillary. This is my exact point. The legal system is not going after the people who actually have broken the law, and we know that they did. They're not going after Hillary Clinton. The people that lied to a FISA judge. We think maybe the FISA judge was in on it. We don't know. Whatever. They're not being pursued. The law is not applying equally here. That is a huge deal, folks. The rule of law is the glue, the honor system, the acceptance of the moral code, the legal code of the country. If it's only going to apply to certain people, and people who are in positions of great power are allowed to break the law with impunity, only a matter of time. And that is what is happening. And it is being sanctioned as, well, this is what's necessary to get rid of Trump. They're telling themselves these drastic steps are needed because we have to get rid of Trump, because Trump is just so, what, unacceptable. Now, wait a minute, Trump won the election. Well, no, see, that doesn't even count for anything anymore. When genuine election winners are automatically illegitimate because they won, then where are we headed, folks? Midwestern Democrats want the National Party to stop the Trump-Russia talk. Yeah, the only ones who want to do this are Democrat activists who are already voting Democrat. That's a sub-headline. Democrat National Committee's drumbeat of messaging on Trump and Russia is wearing thin with some Democrats in purple states, particularly in the Midwest, where people on the ground say voters don't care anymore. And in fact, some voters, even on the Democrat side, are being turned off by the issue. Why do you think that might be? Why do you think even some Democrat voters might be turned off by this? Because there's nothing there. They have been beaten upside the head. They have been beaten over the head for a year and a half that Trump was in collusion with Russia. There isn't any evidence. People are fed up with it. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The left doesn't care who gets mad, who gets destroyed, who gets harmed. It doesn't matter. But local Democrats are begging the national people to get off of this. And Dingy Harry stepped out of his retirement coffin and said, stop all this impeachment talk. A number of Democrats, please stop this impeachment talk. There isn't an impeachable offense yet. Does that even matter? The media says there is. The media says Trump's presidency is impeachable because Trump won. That is such an affront to everybody's sensibilities. Trump is instantly impeachable because he won. Because it was unexpected. Because somebody like that just can't be president. Not in our world. There's no rational thinking to this, and there's no reason to it. And to try to analyze it and understand it in those terms will be a failure. But the people that have to win elections are starting to get nervous, and they're not seeing a big blue wave if these national leftist freaks don't start shutting up. Just out, exclusive poll. In fact, who is the poll is from McLaughlin and Associates and Dick Morris, former Clinton pollster. This poll shows Americans side with Trump over the Mueller probe. National poll, 1,000 likely voters show support for Trump and suspicion of the investigation of Robert Mueller. 51 to 33% voters do not believe Mueller has found real evidence of corruption by the president. Bingo! Now, two things about this. I think it dovetails with the internal polling of the Democrat Party. We've been chronicling with you for the past week how Democrats are urging candidates to get off of this, to stop talking about it. And it had to be because their internal polling numbers on this are so bad. The Mueller investigation, we know it's also bombed out because they've now gone on to Cohen. They're going to any direction they can. They can't find evidence of Trump collusion. My friends, it was never about that. I want you to hear me. It was never about proving that Trump colluded. Now, some of these people, it's a toughie here because some of these people on the left may be deranged enough to actually think that Trump colluded and cheated, and that's why they lost. But there are enough radical leftists to know the truth here. It was Hillary that colluded, producing an opposition research document. They got a FISA warrant. Everybody's known that the Obama, DOJ, FBI, CIA has been doing everything it can to stop Trump's election, to make sure Hillary got elected for a number of reasons. A, to shield Obama from any legal action it might take by shielding Hillary from any legal action. But the fact is, there hasn't been any evidence. There isn't going to be any evidence. It's all been a gigantic effort to move public opinion on Trump down. They wanted his approval numbers in the 30s, and if they could get it into the high 20s, that would be nirvana. Because when that happens, they can get rid of Trump. You cannot force a president out of office unless the American people want him gone. And they had to make the American people want Trump gone. They have failed in every attempt they have made to do this. But the danger is, in addition to what they're doing, the danger is what they are destroying in the process, and how at each juncture they fail, they mount a new assault that corrupts a new area, a new line of attack. They are leaving a trail of destruction throughout our politics and our culture and our society. And I worry, where does this stop? Because it isn't going to stop. I don't care what happens in the midterms. If the Republicans hold the House, if the Democrats take it, this effort is not going to stop. It is going to continue. They simply cannot abide Donald Trump in the White House, even if what they do dooms their electoral chances in 2020. They still will not stop. And don't tell Steve Scalise that the resistance hasn't yet gotten violent, because it has in a couple of key three or four places. So more Americans are waking up and seeing that Mueller hasn't produced anything, that there isn't. And you can totally understand this, because the American people have gotten up every day and they have literally been beat up, upside the head, on top of the head, 5, 10, 25 times a day. News story after news story after news story after panel discussion after panel discussion after analyst after expert assure them that Donald Trump colluded, and the evidence is only right there. It's just a matter of time before we get it. It's there. Everybody knows it. There isn't any. They are wearing the emotion, the reservoir, the emotional reservoir of the American people. They're depleting it. But it's not stopping them. This is the key. It isn't stopping them as they continue They are destroying things. They are destroying people. And it is intentional. And as they continue to fail, they get even more deranged, unhinged, and filled with even more hatred. And every institution on the left has become corrupted by it. As I say, you can't find left-wing comedy anymore, from college students and their political correctness not permitting humor, to the late-night comedians literally, viscerally hating Donald Trump and turning comedy into hate. Television show plot lines are becoming ridiculous. They're becoming embarrassingly ridiculous, as they're all predicated on lie after lie after lie regarding Donald Trump, his campaign, his victory, and his presidency. College campuses are awash in this hatred, thanks to the faculty, thanks to the executives that run these institutions. Nobody is applying the brakes on these people who are wreaking havoc, causing great damage, and worsening in the process. And now the law has been corrupted, even more so than it usually is. People are wantonly breaking it and getting away with it and not being held account. And people who haven't done anything are being ruined, or are being targeted, or are being intimidated, all in an effort to make you hate Donald Trump and want him gone. And that's why it isn't going to stop. They're going to continue to think that it's possible, regardless of election results, regardless of election returns. They will not give up on the idea that they can make you hate Trump just like they do. So who fixes all of this that they're breaking? And they are breaking a lot of things. They are ruining a lot of things. Now, thank God, it appears they have yet to succeed in permanently screwing up the Supreme Court. Oral arguments today over Trump's travel ban. And I have relevant transcripts that I want to share with you here, involving comments and questions from the Chief Justice, John Roberts, and Samuel Alito, and even some from Justice Kennedy. I think Roberts and Kennedy are considered the swing votes here. Now, to set this up and refresh your memory, one of the first things that happened after Trump was inaugurated was a travel ban on a certain specific number of countries. Not all of them Muslim, but some of them were. The left immediately, they already had people in position at the airports just waiting for the go signal. The media portrayed this as a spontaneously combustible protest, but it wasn't spontaneous. Paid protesters, the mobs, were on hold and stationed at various places, airports, other public places, malls, waiting for Trump to do anything that would warrant a protest. Here comes the travel ban. Phone call was made. Massive amounts of people, thousands of people, it made it look like, are showing up, protesting at airports, shutting down operations over Trump's travel ban. Leftist activists attempt to claim in federal courts that the travel ban is unconstitutional on the basis of what Trump said during the campaign, not what the order said. And judges in Washington and Hawaii agreed that what Trump said on the campaign trail was enough to invalidate his order, even though his order was not discrimination against Muslims, majority Muslims, or what have you. And yet it was portrayed that way, and two federal judges continued to stay. Every revised order the Trump administration came up with, this was destined to go to the Supreme Court, and today it got there in the form of oral arguments. If we had lost the court would agree with these federal judges who said what Trump said in a campaign trail is enough to suggest that his order here on a travel ban is discriminatory and therefore unenforceable. And the lawyer opposing Trump's travel ban, some guy named Katyal, is arguing that what Trump said on the campaign trail is of use in determining the anti-Muslim bias of Trump and thus his travel ban or his order. So I have here a good section from the oral arguments. Justices Kennedy, Roberts, and Alito. Kennedy and Roberts were seen as the decisive votes on this before it all started. So remember, this is just oral arguments. So the anti-Trump lawyer, Mr. Katyal, says, again, we wouldn't have a problem with it if it was tailored to a crisis and that it would sunset at some point down the road. And then, it can be re-upped or something like that. But that's not what Trump's order says. This is about a perpetual problem, a perpetual anti-discriminatory ban on Muslims. Justice Kennedy. So you want the president to say, I'm convinced that in 6 months we're going to have a safe world. In other words, Kennedy said, wait a minute, you want a sunset on this order? So you want the president in putting this order into effect to say he's convinced in 6 months that we're going to have a safe world and we can lift this? You want to tie his hands? You want me to tie his hands? Katyal says, well, no, Justice Kennedy, it's not our argument. Our argument is here the president's identifying something that's a perennial problem. Our brief says it goes back 100 years, when the Soviet Union was around. We don't have countries that cooperate with us in vetting. And the solution's always been from Congress not to have a flat ban, but instead to have a fine-grained vetting system to balance these considerations. This guy is saying Trump's travel ban's too overbroad. We can't do it in cooperation with other countries. We need to do it person by person by person, have a vetting system person by person. Chief Justice Roberts says, okay, well, what if military advisors tell the president that in their judgment, the president ought to order a strike, an airstrike against Syria? And the president says, well, does that mean he can't? Roberts is saying, does that mean Trump can't? Because you would then show up here and say Trump is discriminating against a majority Muslim country, so Trump cannot announce military action in Syria because you're going to show up here and tell me that he's discriminating against Muslims? And the guy says, absolutely not. There's nothing to do with the text of the statute. That's not at all what we're talking about here. But Roberts has made the point. Justice Alito, Mr. Katyal, would any reasonable observer reading this proclamation without taking into account statements think this was a Muslim ban? Read the actual order, Mr. Katyal. Would anybody think that this is a Muslim ban? Alito said, there are 50 predominantly Muslim countries in the world. 5 predominantly Muslim countries are on this list. The population of the predominantly Muslim countries on this list make up 8% of the world's Muslim population. How can you say that this is an overbroad ban on all Muslims entering the country when it only covers 8% of the world's Muslim population? Then Alito says later, it does not look at all to me, sir, like a Muslim ban. There are other justifications that jump out as to why these particular countries were put on the list. So it seems to me the list creates a strong inference that this was not done for invidious purpose. Now, this reading of the order could have happened with the first judge. The order was entirely constitutional. The original travel ban, because the president has full and total authority by statute and by precedent. I don't want to revisit it, what we did at the time. But don't doubt me. A legitimate, non-biased, non-politicized judge would have read the original ban as not a ban on Muslims. But what the original federal judges did, yeah, maybe so, but listen to what Trump said on the campaign trail. It's clear he hates Muslims, and so we're not going to allow this ban to go. And Alito is saying it has nothing to do with it. He's not banning more than 8% of the Muslim population. Now, this is salvation time. But this is how thin. We got basically 2 or 3 judges looking. I'm sure some of the other conservative justices, quote unquote, agree with this line of thinking. But this is how precarious Supreme Court is. One more judge. And all of this would be labeled unconstitutional because of things that have nothing to do with the law and nothing to do with Trump's ban and nothing to do with anything other than Trump hatred. So, 2 federal judges. Well, you and I all know the corruption of the federal court system by virtue of leftists populating it for the purposes of losing elections insurance. But this trail of destruction is continuing right in front of us, unabated, as they find no evidence of their claims. They're on to something else just as baseless, just as absent evidence. Who's there to tell them to stop? Used to be the system. The system. It used to be adherence to the norms of our Constitution, the rule of law. None of that matters. They're the radical left that's now hijacked and populates and dominates the Democrat Party. And they are, at the same time, the U.S. media. Back in a moment. And back to the phones. This is Evan in Concho, Arizona. Great to have you, sir. How are you doing?
Good morning. I was saying to your call screener, there is no truth in images. There's only truth in words. And the proof of that is we don't say things like, oh, you can count on his image, or he gave his image, or man shall not live by bread alone, but by every image that proceeds from God. Words are where truth is at. And radio's focus is words. Television's focus is image. And it's easy to see why conservatives rule talk radio and liberals have television.
You know, this, I didn't know where you were headed with this, but I have to tell you, that is an interesting take on this. You say a person gives his word that something he says is true, gives his word that something he promises to do, he'll do. He doesn't, here, let me give you this image, and let that tell you that I'm telling the truth. It's clever. It's humorous. It's funny. It's also to be true. There also is a reason, folks. I can't tell you the number of times that people have asked me in all of these years, how come the liberals bomb on radio? And I've had my answers, and there are probably as many answers as there are questions. But this guy, Evan here in Concho, Arizona, says if words, I've said it myself, words mean things. Words are the truth, and the truth is not. Look, I know they say the same thing about us, but I'm telling you, they are not about truth. They have their truth, and anything outside their truth is not permitted. They're not interested in free and open debate. They're not interested in the exchange of ideas. They're interested in their version of whatever, and anything else is not going to be heard, is going to be silenced or shut down if they can. And that's true. And they can't debate because they don't think they should have to. There is no debate because there is nothing legitimate outside what they believe. They do not believe they should even have to persuade people. People who don't believe are to be written off and silenced, or what have you. There's a lot of other reasons too. They don't understand entrepreneurism and an actual business. They understand funding and donations and this kind of thing. But I think it's rooted in content. Like he says, I really do think that's why they bomb. And it's a holiday you don't want to miss. It's a holiday you want to be late for. Mother's Day, something you should definitely plan ahead. Be thoughtful for all the right reasons. Sending flowers on Mother's Day is the right thing to do. You know it, and I know it. And you may think Mom might like something else. Flowers every year. Everybody's going to be giving Mom flowers. I'm going to go for something different. We'll do that. Go for something different. But don't forget the flowers. I don't mean this in a deprecating way. They are expected. They're expected because they're loved. They're expected because they are appreciated. And you cannot go wrong. I'm telling you. No matter what you think, you cannot go wrong with flowers. And 1-800-Flowers will help you do this right. You choose the kind of arrangement your mom would like, or you choose the kind of arrangement you want her to have. You choose the day you want it delivered. If you choose to send roses, 1-800-Flowers picks them at their peak and ships them overnight the same day they are picked. That ensures their freshness. That means they're going to smell good for a long time. Beauty and aroma will last for days because they are picked and shipped the same day. To order, 1-800-Flowers.com. Go there. Click on the radio icon, use my name as the promo code, RUSH, and scout around. Pick whatever arrangement you want. You've got any number of things to choose from. You can go the roses route. They've got other special arrangements you can choose from, or put your own together. Make it yourself. Make it your own. 1-800-Flowers.com. Remember, offer code is RUSH. There is a website / news organization out there called Axios. And Axios is essentially a bunch of millennials, and they think they have a new way of doing the news. They report the news in 2 paragraphs. The next paragraph, why is it important? Then the next paragraph, what does it mean? Then the next paragraph, should you care? And then the next paragraph, are you still reading this? Axios has a story on their website that says millennials are blaming baby boomers for ruining their lives. Let me read. Beset by big college loans, inheriting 2 wars, and facing an uncertain future of work, a majority of millennials say baby boomers have made things worse for them, and a lot of boomers agree, according to a new Axios SurveyMonkey poll. Next paragraph, why does it matter? If it persists, the generational divide can turn into political rivalry as the generations compete for limited tax dollars, millennials seeking government help as automation takes hold, and boomers insisting on promised Social Security and Medicare. 51% of millennials, that's people 18 to 34, blame boomers, which are 51 to 69 years old, for making things worse for their generation. Now, I'm not sure, but I think this may be, I don't know if it's unique or not. I don't remember a poll of 18 to 34-year-olds who thought their future was doomed and that their parents were responsible for it. Do you? Now, there could be, though. I mean, there's a number of polls taken out there over the years, and I just don't remember one this prominent, nor this take. Notice that the take, notice, why does this matter? Competition for government welfare dollars. Competition for entitlement dollars. What the hell? Okay, if you don't think the government's going to have enough money, have you ever thought of working? Anybody? Has anybody WORK? The way it works is it's called a job. You go out there, you do something, and you do it really well, and people pay you for it. And then if you have something that only you can do, you open your own business, and you get income in that way. And then hopefully it grows. And the harder you work, there's that word again, WORK, theoretically, the more money you need. And the more money you earn, the less money from other people you're going to be entitled to or need. You probably won't stop wanting it, and you probably won't stop thinking you deserve it. But why would you turn over your needs to other people? Anybody ever heard of self-reliance? That means relying on yourself. This stuns me. The reason the boomers and the millennials are going to be at war is a competition for essentially entitlement dollars. Now, there's one area with the millennials I totally agree with them. Well, debt, yeah, but college loan debt. I think that the establishment, the elites, the ruling elites, the people who think they've got all the answers have destroyed destroyed's a strong word. They have done great damage to the whole notion of a college education. It's insidious. The first thing they've done, and it started, it's as old as the country is. Got to get an education, little Johnny. Got to get an education. You're not going anywhere, little Johnny, unless you get an education. And that then became, you got to go to college, little Johnny. If you don't go to college, you're never going to amount to anything, little Johnny. And then little Johnny's parents, and yeah, if little Johnny doesn't go to college, they're not going to think much of me either. They're going to think my kid's a worthless ne'er-do-well. So parents began to insist that little Johnny go to college. No matter what else, go to college, little Johnny. And, of course, people involved in the colleges said, come on, little Johnny and little Mary and everybody else, and pay whatever we charge you. And then the colleges became basically indoctrination camps. And so they became even more important to the ruling elite. How to turn out an ongoing, never-ending generation after generation of nine-numbed liberals? College. And then people said, gosh, we can get rich doing this. A, we've got everybody convinced they have to go. And since they have to go, they're going to go. And no matter what it costs. And we'll come up with the scholarship and then the benefits and then this and then the student loan program. And now, little Johnny's got to go to college. If he doesn't go to college, he doesn't have a chance. He's not going to know anything. He's not going to get a job. He's not even going to know what entitlement dollars are. But it's going to cost little Johnny anywhere from $40,000 to $200,000. So when little Johnny gets out of college, he's working for the lending institution for how many years before he even gets to appreciate any of the income generated by his degree? I'm serious. I think these people running a student loan program and all this turn this thing into an albatross around graduates' necks. What they have done to the whole notion of a college education is obscene to me. And you'll notice nobody ever cuts tuition. You know, we'll beat up on the oil companies all day for gas prices. And we'll beat up on cable companies all day for how much it costs to get cable TV. And we'll beat up on this company and that industry and all that. But somehow, the pseudo and faux intellectuals at liberal institutions of higher learning, nobody ever claims they're ripping anybody off. Nobody ever claims they're charging too much. 60 grand a semester at Harvard plus room and pay it. Worth it. Is it? Who can afford this without taking out a loan? Very few people. People that are given scholarships to go to universities probably don't even end up going to class half the time because they're not there to go to class. But look at how, seriously, look how much it costs these days. Look at the debt that people now have graduating. I'm not for debt forgiveness of student loans, but that's what's going to happen. It's been alluded to. Hillary was talking about it during her campaign. It's going to, I thought Obama would actually do it. I actually thought forgiveness of student loans would happen with Obama. But now, look at Crazy Bernie. Look at Crazy Bernie now has an idea that, by the way, Donald Trump has already fixed. Donald Trump's already done. Have you heard about Crazy Bernie? Crazy Bernie, as part of his next campaign, is going to suggest that everybody in America be guaranteed a job. minimum $15 an hour. Somebody said to Crazy Bernie, well, what happens when all the jobs are filled and there's still people out of work? Crazy Bernie had the answer. We'll hire them in the government. We'll just make them government employees. What are they going to do? It doesn't matter. What they do doesn't matter. What we give them is what matters. Crazy Bernie is promising full employment. The only problem is that Trump's, for all intents and purposes, already done it. We are at statistical full employment now. Unemployment in the African American and Hispanic communities is at an all-time low. There are more African Americans working, more Latinos, more Hispanics working percentage basis than any time in American history. The unemployment rate's barely over 4%. New jobs are being created regularly. It's sustaining itself as the economy rebounds. And I find it fascinating. In the midst of all this, Crazy Bernie comes along as though nobody can find a job and promises everybody a job. Okay, you know who ought to be standing in opposition to this right now is, well, aside from everybody, but people that run universities. Because if Crazy Bernie's idea ever happens, nobody's going to need an education to get a job. All you're going to need is Crazy Bernie. They want to turn Santa Claus into 365 days a year, not one. And you know what's really sad? The legitimate arguments against this will go over a lot of people's heads. It will not resonate. The market-driven, the personal value, work, reward arguments, all of the arguments against this that make pure intellectual economic sense will go over the heads of people, and they'll be seen as mean-spirited racism or bigotry or cold-hearted attitudes toward the poor or what have you. I got to take a break here. But millennials, baby boomers, and a coming war over a limited number of entitlement dollars. You want to bet there's a limited, we're $21 trillion in debt. It's been demonstrated here that there is no interest whatsoever in even making the pretense of containing spending. Anyway.